power within. Every one of us has got an enormous dynamo, highly efficient, highly effective, highly productive. But not recognizing that is what makes it absolutely zero. But awakening it, raising it, manifesting it, and using it for society good only keeps enhancing it. So we need to bring out the power within, actually to make it power with others, to generate the good that the world needs today.
Welcome to Indian News. Our guest today is Dr. Balu. He is author of Power Within. We are going to talk to him today about how did he come with this idea of writing this book, what is power within, and also he has been teaching at several US universities. He has studied here in the US, and now he lives in India and works with the Prime Minister's office, helping the Prime Minister in different areas. So, Dr. Balu, welcome to our studio.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, absolutely. It's an honor to talk to you, and somebody who believes in power within, so I'm very excited to talk about that. Tell us about this. What is your concept of power within?
You see, generally power within is basically described from appreciation of leadership and how do we look at power in the position of leadership that we have. Most of us confuse leadership with positions of authority, and therefore power is something a person in authority knows and understands. But the Indian appreciation of leadership is always about the control of your inner self. It's not about the outside world and what you do in the outside world, but also the manifestation of your outside world and actions there should emerge from the inner power. And so power within is what in Sanskrit we say is Indriya Nigraha, or the control of your senses. And by manifesting this control or the power within and exercising it in an appropriate way in the context in which you operate to accomplish things in the world outside is what I call as power within.
And and where did the inspiration come from for this book?
You see, having studied at Harvard here and taught at Cornell, course on leadership for close to 15 years, I always somehow felt uncomfortable that people think that leadership is something which is researched and documented and written by the West, and therefore the global North understands it very well, and the whole world has to follow a homogenized appreciation of leadership. But having lived and worked in the forest of India, having seen traditional chieftains, the tribals, and exercising leadership in a far more advanced and nuanced way, I thought something was not gelling for me. So my own identity as an Indian sort of asked me to ask the question, how much of India's understanding of leadership do I really know? And I started getting deep into things like the Jataka tales, the Panchatantra, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and started filtering it and seeing it from the perspective of leadership. And once I started doing it with the Western knowledge that I had, I thought if we can synthesize it together and explain leadership from the construct of the Indian civilizational view and offer it as a solution to the problems of the world today, that be what is needed. That's what is really needed. And that's how this book and the concept of the book emerged.
So now you were born in India, grew up there, studied there, and then you also studied here in the US, you keep visiting US. Is there any difference between the definition of leadership, the Indian or in the Indian context versus the Western context?
I would say much more than the definition, the very understanding of leadership is slightly different. In the West, generally, we appreciate the leader. We see it more as a noun form. But I think in India, we celebrate acts of leadership. It's a more the active form, the verb form. So today, if I were to define leadership from the Indic space, I would say leadership is about understanding yourself. That's what Svadhyaya that the Bhagavad Gita describes about. It's about understanding others around us and understanding the actions that bind the self to the others. It's a constant evolution, the actions that bind the self to the others. And that's what I would say is leadership. Well, we see being a leader in the West is important. In the East, it's more expressions of leadership. Well, the West celebrates expressions of power, the power without. I think in India, we celebrate the ability to control the power that comes within myself. And for me to celebrate that is more important than just the expressions of leadership.
So now, I was born and grew up in India, and I saw in a very different way the structure of authority and leadership. And my understanding was that despite all these teachings and everything, the India is very, egocentric. There is a hierarchical society where there's hierarchy on every scale, whether you go by caste or whether you go by power or the bureaucracy. So in that context, how the type of leadership you were talking about is really applicable there.
I think that's exactly the reason why the leadership I talk about is necessary, relevant, and most needed. Because for too long have we misunderstood positions of authority to be expressions of leadership. There are a lot of authority structures, like you explained, socially there are differences, economically there are differences. But capitalizing on them is not leadership. That is counterfeit leadership. True leadership or real leadership is when you exercise leadership in spite of or along with having power, whether it could be formal authority that you have or informal authority that you have. So the whole idea is to appreciate that we play different roles. If I'm the sarpanch of my village in India, it's a role I play. But that's distinctly different from the self. The moment you confuse your role for self, then the ego that you talk about actually emerges. But if I appreciate, go to the balcony and see, that is only a role I'm playing in a particular context. And in that context, I need to do what I need to do, but that's not myself. Then you'll understand how leadership can get expressed. So to me, what you say is right, but the way I need to appreciate and distinguish leadership from actual authority is very critical. And that's why all of us have to do, not just India, everywhere around the world today, the mess that is getting created is because of expressions of egos of people or failures of leadership. And that is why this book is so important now.
So now let us stay on the leadership. And in the Western world, what is one great thing about the Western leadership you have found?
I think the way the Western world looks at leadership, it's very results focused. They really are very clear. They are held accountable for producing those results. And the sense of accountability in delivering something that is expected to be delivered by the man in exercising leadership is very critical. I am not saying other countries are not as focused on that. So the focus is a lot more on the ends. Other cultures, the focus could be a lot more on the means.
So what is the one negative thing you think that this is not good for the Western leadership style?
The Western leadership style is obsessed with the self. It's all about me, me, me. It's about I doing this and I'm going to bring about change. I'm going to change my country. I'm going to bring about societal change. I think we need to understand it's not about I being at the center. It's about focusing on the work at the center and getting it done. And that is exactly what the East talks about.
So now for me, the I equals to ego. And ego can be a terrible thing. So how, if you can just define that fine line between that ego and the I?
So I can give an example. I was part of the anti-corruption movement in India. So I could take the view that corruption has to be fought. That is focusing on the work at the center. Or I can take the view that I must be seen to be an anti-corruption activist and fight corruption. That is where I'm promoting the ego. So it's something like, I celebrating my acts is egoistic, but allowing the acts to be celebrated is non-egoistic expression. I can explain this with a very Indian example. In India, we talk of seva or service. If we are sitting here together and let's say you drop your phone or your pen, I pick it up and give it to you and you don't say anything to me. And if I in that instant feel this man is not even courteous, he doesn't even say thank you for this, then it's ego. But if I say I had the opportunity to serve him, that's all that matters. So my dharma is to serve you, and I served you by lifting your phone and giving it back to you. That is getting the act of service done. So that is non-egoistic.
So now coming back to the Indian leadership style. So what is the one great thing about the Indian leadership style?
There the focus is not on me, the focus is on how do you get something done. So it's not me, but it's my nahi hum. I will put it that way. It is more collaborative. It's about saharidayata, leading to sahakaryata, where there's a oneness of heart which leads to oneness of action. And that's a very, very powerful thing. It's about recognizing that everybody has something to bring to the table. It's about understanding that perspectives can be very different for each person, coming at different levels. But how do we create a common narrative and get action to happen? It's about one's own dharma and being faithful to the role that you play. We all have different roles and therefore different definitions of dharma in those roles. But not confusing this with your actual dharma as a human being. So they are distinctly different. And appreciating this, differentiating this, separating role from self is what is very unique about Indian way of thinking.
And what is one bad thing about the Indian leadership style, which you absolutely hate?
It's a very difficult thing to answer because all my life I was trying to discover it. My view is we in India generally are very because of this concept of Indriya Nigraha and wanting to subsume the I. We are very hesitant to even say things that need to be told, and we hesitate in being candid. We are so conscious of not hurting the other person, but we misunderstand that leadership is about learning the art of communicating, even loss to a constituent, or even communicating loss to you of something I don't think you would appreciate, loss of your emotions, loss of your ideology. I need to do. In India, generally, Indian leadership hesitates, and I think that's not a very good thing of leadership.
Now let's come back to Prime Minister Modi. He is one of the roles in your book, The Power Within, and how he comes into this book.
See, my research in understanding Indian civilization history, the wisdom, and appreciating how we can pick leadership knowledge from this was getting done, and I was getting frustrated that I was discovering so much. I thought no one single person can manifest all this. So I was desperately looking, and one thing I can say very confidently about India, and it's true of most countries, is when you start discovering material from your history or civilizational knowledge that you can't possibly emulate or imitate, we end up worshipping them, put them on a pedestal, and especially in India, we have jayantis for it, and we say, my job is done. So I didn't want this book to describe Mahabharata and the leadership expressed then, or Ramayana and Rama's leadership. All that is important, but it can be dismissed off as it's all the past. So I wanted those principles to be brought alive today in today's context, but see if I can find somebody, whether it's a Gandhi or a Patel or Ambedkar. They're all great, extraordinary people who exercise great leadership, but they're all in the past. So I wanted something current, realistic, and contemporary that you and I could relate to in flesh and blood. So 3 years ago, when I had the opportunity to be appointed to the Capacity Building Commission, which reports into the Prime Minister and his HR Council, I had an opportunity watching from close quarters, see him in action, and suddenly I realized a lot of what I was discovering, he was actually trying to live it in practice. And I thought, why not I use him as a real life exemplar, a case study, to describe what I was, to bring out what I was discovering, describe it in a way in which people can relate to, and tell it like a narrative so that people can understand that you can live this leadership. So finally, it's not about Prime Minister Modi or his leadership. It's mostly about our power within and manifesting it, each of us in our own small way, so that we can actually make a difference in the world in whatever spaces we are working at.
So, in a way, Modi narrates or symbolizes the message of the book,
Yes.
Power Within. But also, Modi is also a very controversial person, especially when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So, how did you reconcile these things in your book?
I really had no difficulty reconciling, because I think in the world we operate today, things have become so binary.
Mm-hmm.
You either love somebody or you hate somebody. You're either for something or against something, which I think is unfair. Being a policy analyst coming from a world of evidence and measuring things with data, I would only go by, when I decided to do this job and find an exemplar, I would say, what does evidence tell me? Well, it could be accused of, or the narratives could be created. Every court of law in the country, from the lowest court, every investigating agency of the country, when he was not in power, when somebody else was in power, has constantly and consistently said he had no role to play. And so to me, there is no controversy. It's only controversy in people's minds who want to believe what they want to believe and not look at facts. We all live in a strange world. When the court judgment is something that's aligned to my thinking, I celebrate the courts and the judiciary. When it is not, I criticize them. I think both are unfair. We just go with the data that's presented, and consistently when something is reported the same way, I don't think what the noise outside tells. I have to believe what I see.
So this power within is applicable to each and every individual
Absolutely.
across the world, right? It doesn't matter.
It is location agnostic.
Okay.
It applies to anybody in any context of leadership.
Okay. Now, who are some of the other figures in India who think that they are a little bit closer? They demonstrate the message of your book.
I think there are several leaders. In fact, even in my own book, I actually mentioned 3 global leaders in their own context, in their own spaces. It may be generationally apart. For example, I talk of Abraham Lincoln from the United States. I talk of Lee Kuan Yew from Singapore. I talk of Deng Xiaoping from China, who all made major shifts in their countries. And in the context in which they operated, exercised great leadership. So that leadership may not be contextually relevant today, even for their own countries, because countries have moved on and a lot of things have changed. But finally, it's the courage to actually express that power within. So in India, I would say some extraordinary leadership has been exercised by people like Mahatma Gandhi, by people like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Even recently, Atal Bihari Vajpayee in his own tenure as the Prime Minister, or even people, it's not just in political fields. We have had great exercise of leadership in the world of music, like M.S. Subbulakshmi, if I can name her, or Bhimsen Joshi, if I can name him in the world of music, from arts to theatre to writing to Rabindranath Tagore and people like that, who all brought out extraordinary work by tapping into the power within. The greatest example I can think of would be Swami Vivekananda, Ramana Maharishi, or Sri Aurobindo. So it doesn't matter which space you are in, as long as you can dive deep into yourself and bring out that power within. I think the expression of it, society will surely benefit.
What about the women leaders?
There are several of them, right from the days of Maitri to Garge to a lot of them.
Like in modern context?
In modern context, since I have not done deep research in that space, it would be wrong of me to give out names. But I would definitely say that they're extraordinary leaders, because it's just wrong to judge that it's very gender driven. I think there are expressions, but my research right now has not included them in the space. I hope to do that soon.
Okay. So now somebody reads this book or somebody watches this interview and they get inspired by, power within. So now my question to you is, okay, I want to awaken this power within. How I do that? What are your suggestions?
I think it's a great question. One very famous brand management expert, Suhail Seth in India, he called me and he described this book as possibly one of the finest do-it-yourself kits he read. Now, by reading this book, you'll appreciate the several aspects to the expression of power within. One is the actual ability to control your power within. The second is how do you titrate it and manifest it for the good of others. I would say one sentence, a very Vedic sentence is, Atmano mokshartam jagat hitayacha. My internal evolution, the power within, but expression of that for society's benefit outside, jagat hita. So I have spoken about how do you actually appreciate control of your heart, body, mind and soul. What do you do for your physical nature? If you look at the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and all the description it gives, it's also a very titrated, incremental way of looking at your heart, body, mind and soul. So this I describe, right from how do you take care of your body, how do you take care of your emotions, how do you take care of your intellectual processes and learning requirements, manifest it, how do you communicate, how do you manifest different qualities, how do you express the determination to succeed, how do you exercise discipline, how do you actually discriminate between real and false, how do you do this kind of discerning actions, and how do you live your life with tyaga and seva. And doing this is what is the manifestation of the power within. I describe leadership as a spiritual journey, and that's what Indian treatises and scriptural wisdom tells us all about.
Now, can we have some just quickly fire type questions? I will
Absolutely.
just ask you one thing and then you
In one
just
sentence, yes.
Yeah?
I'll try to.
Okay, let's have some fun with that.
Great.
Okay. So basically the idea is that I will say a word and you say what comes to your mind.
Great.
Okay. So Gandhi,
Honesty,
Modi,
hard work,
Mother Teresa,
charity,
Lincoln,
courage of conviction,
leadership,
living for others,
philanthropy,
concern for societal good,
Western world,
dominance or pretension of dominance,
and India,
scriptural wisdom, India.
Bala, when it comes to when I ask you, say business,
I would say, in the context of India, I would say Tatas.
in the context of the West,
I would say societal good.
technology,
I would definitely insist on societal good.
profit,
I would say maximization, but it's wrong.
capitalism,
Compassionate capitalism.
communism,
I would say think of the past.
key to success,
Hard work.
failure.
Nothing called failure.
When I was reading your bio somewhere, it was mentioned that you got inspired actually at the age of 19 by Vivekananda, and you started a youth foundation for mission of Vivekananda. So let's start at that time. What really, what was going on in your life that you were impacted by Vivekananda philosophy?
as most Indians understand, coming from a very typical middle class family, our aspirations in India back home are you either acquire a degree in medicine or you acquire a degree in engineering and take the first flight out of the country, possibly land up at US or UK and start your life from there. And I was no different, coming from the city of Bangalore, which is now very well known for being the IT capital of India. I wanted to also study computer science, and that's when it was actually introduced 40 years ago when we were all very young students. And I wanted to study at IIT, the Indian Institute of Technology, but didn't get admission there. And then I thought like, next best school is what was then called regional engineering colleges. I didn't possibly get into those two. I had a very high percentage in my entry level marks, but I didn't get an admission. So I just chose a college in Bangalore, which was also well known, called the BMS College of Engineering. And the first day I went to college, I was badly hazed, or what is known as ragging in India. We didn't have an anti-ragging law those days. So out of sheer cowardice and my fear to go back to college, I had to go somewhere, because being middle class, you don't have enough money to spend on yourself on a movie theater, or you don't have the courage to come back home. So I just beside the college in Bangalore was the Ramakrishna Mission. And I thought the gates were wide open. It was a very nice looking place. I just went in and I started spending some time there. Yes, I went and sat in their library. And in the next 2 months, read what was then available as 8 volumes, the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Now it's 9 volumes. And pretty much in 2 months, I read everything that Swamiji wrote. I might not have comprehended much. I might not have understood. I was a young 17-year-old at that time. But what inspired me were 2 small books of Swami Vivekananda. So one was called To the Youth of India. The second was His Call to the Nation. And 2 powerful quotes, which even today guides me in my life. One was, I call every young man a traitor who, having been educated at people's expense, pays not the least heed to them. So that struck a chord in me. I said, I don't want to be a traitor to my nation. I've been educated at public expense and I have to give back. The second statement he said, and I think all of us at that age are sort of non-declared socialists in our thinking. We think the world can be a very equal place, and I was no different. And his statement was, I do not believe in a god or religion. And this coming from a sannyasi, from a monk. He said, I do not believe in a god or religion which cannot wipe away the widow's tears or bring a piece of bread to the orphan's mouth. But that statement stayed with me and stayed with me for life. And I said, my life and its mission is going to be try to change this. And same day I got those days we had telegram from the government saying, join Mysore Medical College immediately. For me, that came to me, I felt that was a very divine way of saying your job is chosen for you and this is what you need to do. That was 1982, and 2 years later, into my 3rd year of my medical school, I thought I need to do something about this. And that's when I started the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement.
Now, as we come to the end, your final word about your philosophy and your book.
I think nations like India have been struggling with sort of transcending its challenges of decolonization and learning how to decolonize itself. Now, decolonization is not about just changing the way you dress or the food you eat. It's a deep mindset shift. It's about taking pride in what we have. It's about appreciating what we know and what we have, not from an emotional perspective, but from understanding it, studying it, and presenting it evidentially. Today's world's problems that we're seeing around us are so wicked that one man, one country, or one organization cannot solve it. We need to appreciate and understand that we need the leadership which can bring people together, not fragment them. We need the leadership which can dissolve boundaries and borders, look at people as human beings. Need the leadership which can combine ecology with economy, look at peace, prosperity, profits, and people in the same spirit, and have the courage of conviction to actually take people forward and countries forward. This is something which all of us have to appreciate. Cannot come from somewhere outside, somebody waving a magic wand. But the only way we can do it is awakening the leader within us and having the courage to express it in the small little world that we all occupy and live in.